It's an old saying that farmers live poor but die rich. I'm not sure if that's true, but the question for many farm operations is, who takes over after a lifetime of building a farm? Where's the next generation of farmers coming from? Next on Show Me Ag. Welcome to Show Me Ag. I'm your host, Kyle Vickers. Thanks for joining us. From olden times, there's been a tradition of children taking over the family farm operation. That still happens, but not always. Farmers are farming longer into retirement, and some children are moving on and not willing to come back to the farm. What's that mean for the future of farming here in Missouri? A PBS documentary will be shown later on KMOS examining the transition from one generation to the next. Titled Changing Lands, Changing Hands, it will be a look at the turnover and aging population of farmers to the next generation. Featured on the program are a Missouri couple who we'll meet in a few minutes from their farm near Hallsville, and Dr. Mary Hendrickson, an assistant professor of sociology from the University of Missouri, who's with us tonight. Mary, thank you for coming very much. I've got a preview of the documentary, and you, of course, were on it. Tell us a little bit about how this came about.
Well, I've done a lot of work with the Harvest Public Media, which is one of the groups that's put that together, and they're really interested in food and farming issues. And so they called me up and said, hey, we want to come down and talk to some farmers who are maybe mid-career, who are trying something different, an alternative operation. And so I suggested a couple of people, and they chose to work with Dan and Laura Pugh.
Your background is in rural sociology.
Yes.
So that's really a big issue for rural communities, isn't it? The farmers are getting older, the average age keeps growing. Tell us where we're at here in Missouri.
Well, I think the average age of farmers right now is about 57, 58 in the state of Missouri, which is about like it is nationally. We're not exceptional in that sense. However, what we've seen happening in Missouri, we still have a ton of farms in Missouri. We have 108,000 farms, which puts us really at the top in the number of farms in a state. What we're seeing is a lot of folks are trying to do things differently, trying some alternatives. I actually have been working with a beginning farmer program for the last few years at the University of Missouri. And in that, you really see a lot of people who are mid-career, who are switching careers, who may not have a lot of farm background. Maybe they grew up on a farm, they worked other places for a long time, they want to come back to farming. So I think we're seeing an influx of a lot of different folks into farming right now, which I think is a good thing.
It's not just the oldest son taking over the family business then.
No, it's not. And you know, there's a lot of work we've done at the University of Missouri with the Beginning Farmer Program, helping farmers plan better. You know, we have a Grow Your Farm program through University of Missouri Extension, which is open for people that, say, bought 100 acres out here by Warrensburg or around, and now they're like, oh, I've got 100 acres, what do I do with it, right? So we get people like that, and they go through this kind of Grow Your Farm program where they say, they think about what their values are, what their goals are, and how they want to put that to work in an agriculture business. But we also get farm couples who want to bring their kids back into farming, who are interested in thinking, I can't expand my land, or I can't expand this operation, I got to find something else. So we've had some folks go through the program who are farm families saying, okay, we've got to develop some more enterprises. And you know, those planning things are really important.
Not always just a corn and soybean farmer and $1 million line of equipment then.
That's right. You know, we've got people that are trying, you know, they're trying to do value added perhaps. They'll do agritourism where they'll bring people out to the farm. Maybe people start to bottle their milk, you know, and sell it directly. We have people that turn over some of their land to vegetable production. You know, there's just a lot of different options in farming today.
Well, while many farmers are born into the business and inherit their family farm, there are a growing number of next generation farmers, like Mary has talked about, who are making their own family farm. With different levels of experience, these new farmers are interested in connecting with the land, their food, and others who feel the same way they do. We visited Honey Creek Farm in Hallsville, where one couple decided to leave their city ways behind and raise their kids alongside chickens, sheep, honeybees, and produce.
the name of our farm is Honey Creek Farm, and we named it that because there's a creek that divides the farm up into several different pastures. And we have bees. We don't have honey yet. We're hoping for that. But we wanted something to reflect the land and the diversity of it. But we started with vegetables at the Columbia Farmers Market, and that's been great to get a marketable product and get to know the people in the Columbia area. And we started with sheep a year ago. We had 5 sheep, and now we're up to 24. We bought a ram in the fall that's a dairy ram, and so eventually we hope to make cheese with the sheep milk. Well, we've thought about living outside of town for a long time, just for ourselves. We both grew up in Kansas City, so we're city kids, lived in the suburbs. Then we lived in Columbia the last 15 years before this, and even there we lived in town, very much suburban type living. I've always enjoyed gardening, being outside, so it was just a side interest. But as we thought about moving out in the country, we started reading books and seeing some documentaries and such about food and the American food system and farming, and we started to think, well, maybe we could do it on a larger scale than just for ourselves. And at that time, the University of Missouri got a Beginning Farmers Grant for 3 years. And it was just perfect timing for us because we had no farm background at all.
I think for me, this is a period of time in my life where I'm understanding and realizing that if you believe something or if you dream something, you really can do things. And I mean, I'm pretty old to figure that out, and it's kind of sad. And I'm hoping my kids will learn that much earlier than I did. But it also makes this part of my life very exciting. And so the grazing class, for instance, I think that was the first farm-related class. And you know, the only animals I'd ever been around were dogs and cats and hamsters. And I was in this class with a bunch of these mostly older men who had like hundreds of cows. And they're talking about real specific things about grazing, like how the cow's tongue wraps around the grass and how they eat the grass and what that means. And I'm just thinking, you know, how do you get a cow to go out on the grass? You know, I mean, my thinking was really basic. But that was also the beginning of realizing that it's okay if you go to these classes and don't know anything. There's not really an expectation that you're an expert. And people are nice. They're really good. Even the experienced ones, if they'll talk to us and give us information.
You know, I had gardens that were 10 feet by 10 feet, and that was kind of the extent of it. And to go from that to trying to produce in a market situation once or twice a week, every week, you know, you do great that first harvest, and then the next week people come back and there's nothing there. So trying to learn how to continue the production and growing things that I hadn't grown before, and the different seasons. Usually, you know, most gardeners, they farm, and about this time of year they're ready to hang their hat up and be done, and to start all over again right now, planting all your fall things and into the winter is a whole different scenario. So my biggest obstacle at first was just knowledge, learning how to do things. And then as I get more experience, it was just adjusting, adapting to, you know, every year is different. You know, you may learn one thing at first and figure you think you've got it, and then the next year changes. Last year was our first year growing and selling at the market, and we had the drought. So learning to experience that. After the learning, it was just also an adjustment of, you know, farming is when you're working at a 9-to-5 job, you punch in and punch out and you're done. You go home. Farming, your work is here. There's always something else to do, especially starting a new farm and with all the different things we're doing, and just adapting to that, and with a family and kids, and managing time and the constant challenge of always having things to do. So some of the benefits of living out here is both personal and I think just on a larger scale, feeling like we're connecting with other people and making a difference in other people's lives. Obviously, I love to cook, and if I want fresh food, I can just walk out and basically there's my grocery store out in the front yard. So personal level and trying to eat healthy as a family and letting my kids grow up in that environment, and just the kids living out in the country and experiencing that type of life. But it's been great, the market experience of just developing new relationships with people and where they have shared values of healthy food, and so we've had several tours of our farm, had people out to our farm, and just kind of sharing the experience that we're having with them.
If you'd like to sample some of Pew's fresh produce, you can find them every Wednesday and Saturday at the Columbia Farmers Market. Mary, is this a typical situation, you think, for a lot of the folks that you're visiting with that kind of change in midlife and go a different direction?
I don't think there's anything typical in farming anymore. It used to be, you'd graduate college and go home and farm with your folks, and that's the way you did it. And I don't think there's anything typical now. So we see a number of these folks like the Pews who have answered a call to do something different with their lives, and they're starting to farm. I see a lot of students who come to me at the University of Missouri. I teach sustainable agriculture. So I see a ton of students who all of a sudden are like, I want to know about my food. I want to know these things. And they start, well, maybe I want to do some production. And so they start getting interested into it. So, I don't think there's anything typical anymore.
It's kind of like the weather. There's no such thing as typical. Yeah. I know some states, maybe, I don't know where Missouri sits. Is there some help for these kinds of people that are wanting to start? They don't have they haven't grown up on the farm, raised on a farm, got a dad that's turning it over to them. So where do people go for help?
So one of the biggest things that beginning farmers face is access to land and access to credit to finance things. And that's especially critical if they're trying to do something that's a little bit non-traditional. And so in a state like Nebraska, they have the Center for Rural Affairs there runs a Farm Link program. But even there, it's hard to work out. You have to build a long history of trust, right? When you're going to invite somebody in to take over your farm. So even there, it's not as, they have something, but there's a lot of kinks to work out in these things. What we've seen more is a lot of places, the 2008 Farm Bill provided for a beginning farmers program, and there's actually a really nice website called starttofarm.gov. So start the number 2 farm.gov. And that really walks you through lots of different kinds of decisions you're going to have to make. But we've seen a lot of success in training programs. Just like Laura Pugh said, she went to a grazing school and she had to, she may have started out with not a lot of knowledge. Some people there have more knowledge, and pretty soon you got a lot of people interacting. So those education programs are really good. Planning programs are really good, and we have some of those through University of Missouri Extension, and the surrounding states have those kinds of programs, and I think those are really important as well.
There are some beginning farmer loan programs I know that are federally supported.
There are, and the Missouri Department of Agriculture has a number of different loan programs that a lot of our farmers are eligible for. I'm not positive if the Pews had this, but if you saw them walking through their hoop house, right, that big area where they had all the vegetables growing, those many farmers participated in the NRCS, which is the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service program for helping people transition to organic and put up hoop houses. And so those they
were very successful in Missouri, weren't they?
Yeah, we had a lot of farmers take advantage of that. So there are these different pieces of policy work. But what's interesting to me is we worked with beginning farmers. So I grew up on a farm, you grew up on a farm, you're used to going to the Farm Service Agency office, right? That's something that's just a natural kind of thing. Dad went there and, you're used to that. Well, a lot of these farmers, this is the whole array of USDA programs is very foreign to them. So USDA has been really working hard to try to make sure that people know about them and know that if you're going to qualify for, for as a farmer and qualify for some of the programs, you're going to have to register your farm. So you're going to have to get known in the system. And so those are really important things. So we actually, in the Beginning Farmer program at the University of Missouri, we actually did a whole day and a half training on how do you access farm programs, because people don't realize how many much potential help there's out. NRCS can come out and help you with some farm planning, give you advice. There's just a lot of really good programs out there.
What's the biggest obstacle to most these folks that are starting off brand new? What's their biggest obstacle?
Well, as I said, it's land, access to land. And often people don't really know what to look for when they're buying land, right? So they have to think about how far is it away from the markets? What kind of farm operation do I really want to have? Some people end up with land because they love the view, right? And they thought the woods were pretty. So you've got to, they're not really evaluating it with that critical eye of a farmer thinking, okay, I can do, this is great for pasture, or this
What's
is
underneath the scenery?
Yeah, that this soil, I really got to understand the soil. So that's the lack of knowledge there is something that a lot of places, a lot of programs can help people address. We have soil maps for every place, and that's a really good place to start. So, access to land, figuring out which land will work, but then just doing some of the planning, right? I mean, just to sit down and think, well, I like working with livestock, or no, I don't really want to be tied to the farm all that much time. So we really think it's important for farmers to set down their values and goals and what they want to hope for their farm and for their community. And, this works just as well for, some of our students that come from farms and are going to go back home. They have to think through these kinds of things with their parents as well.
It seems like to me that one of the big challenges is marketing, and the Columbia Farmers Market's really kind of a highlight. There's now farmers markets all over Missouri more than ever, right? Is that the best opportunity for marketing for most of these operations?
Well, for a lot of the young farmers, the beginning farmers who want to do that alternative like vegetables and things like that, farmers markets are great because it allows you to experiment with a lot of things. It allows you to build relationships, but they're pretty time intensive. You have to have a lot. You have to be able to produce, 10 or 15 different kinds of things, small amounts of a large number of crops. So, those are a really great place for young farmers to get into and experiment with. And then they may want to look into other kinds of market opportunities that might be available.
I know you're an assistant professor now at the University of Missouri, so you're teaching classes and these kinds of things for undergraduate students, right?
Yes. We teach, we have a major at the University of Missouri. It's an agriculture major with an emphasis on sustainable agriculture. But I also have a lot of people who minor in sustainable ag. And, we emphasize how you have to balance, the economics of what you want to do, but also with the ecology and with community or social relationships, kind of how you want to live your life and how you want to treat other folks. And so that's what we emphasize in our sustainable ag courses. And we give people, I think a lot of students, I have students who come from larger farms that are going to go back to farming. I have students who grew up in St. Louis West End, the Central West End, that want to farm or are thinking about agriculture, and it's really good for those students to mix because everybody says, oh, I never thought about agriculture that way.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned in the grazing school, I was thinking about the one that I attended, and what you have is people that are used to doing things a certain way for a long time, and it's really hard to break out of those paradigms. So having somebody new coming in with innovative ideas can really wake things up.
That's right, and be it the kids who come home from college or from being away for a while and think of a new marketing strategy or new production strategy to, just somebody new moving in the neighborhood. I was going to say one of the other things that's really important for these young farmers, no matter who it is the support they need, right? The emotional support. You need to do this kind of business. And so in Central Missouri, there's a group of farmers, the Pews are part of that group. They kind of get together on a monthly basis and talk about what's happening and some of their issues. And, our Green Hills Farm Project up in the north central part of the state has done that for 15, 20 years now, just had farmers getting together, talking about their issues, talking about what they're trying to do, and doing things differently.
Well, at the local coffee shop, you can talk about the weather and the big combine that broke down or whatever, but for these folks, it's a little bit different network than the traditional coffee shop group.
Oh, it is, because they're learning from each other, and they really feel they're pulling together, they're not really competitors in that sense, and they're really pulling together and trying to figure out things, and especially if you're trying to do something different, right? If you go to the coffee shop, people might laugh at you at first, right? Until it works. And so it's really important that we try to support these farmers, if they're young farmers or mid-career farmers or people who are retired and trying to figure out what to do with a piece of land. It's really important we support them in a lot of different
Diversity
ways.
can be a good thing.
Diversity is great. It's really wonderful. And I wanted to say that there is a program right up in Kansas City that kind of covers this area too. It's called the Growing Growers Program, and it's a joint program between Kansas State University and MU, and a couple of organizations, including the Kansas Rural Center and Cultivate KC. And that's a really great place. There's an apprentice program, and then they have ongoing trainings over the course of a year. You know, all the different things you need to be competent to be a market farmer. So, you know, there are a lot of things happening. If farmers can search them out, they can find some good things.
You've kind of been in this for a while, and I know from time to time you've no doubt gotten discouraged at the pressure from, I'll call it big ag, and sometimes I'm a part of that and sometimes I'm not, but the pressure from big ag to, you know, grow more corn, grow more soybeans, etc., is pretty strong. How do you feel about the whole future of these alternatives and sustainability in general?
Well, I think that the more diversity we have in agriculture, diverse voices, different people talking about different things, the better off we are. And that diversity extends from the farm, from the ground, the soil microbiology, all the way up to the kinds of policies we decide on. So I think diversity is really, really important. I don't see these alternatives slowing down, really. I see a lot of folks starting, you know, in Kansas City, which would benefit this area too. They're thinking about looking at a food hub, which would be a place to aggregate alternatively produced vegetables and fruits and things like that, be a place to aggregate it. We've got a lot of grocery stores that, you know, I take my class out to the Hy-Vee in Columbia because, you know, those folks are buying some local stuff. So, you know, you mentioned the Columbia Farmers Market. It's a great place, and it's, but you know, it's really competitive. So a smaller market might be a better place for some of these younger farmers to get into to begin with.
If I think back about 10 or 15 years and realize how much progress we have made in some of these alternatives, it's pretty remarkable. Where do you see this going? You just see it continuing to grow?
I do. I think that there's a lot of benefit in the direct marketing relationships, and I think there's a lot of people, those consumers keep growing who want that direct relationship. And you know, Dan and Laura talked about that in the clip. So they want that direct relationship with their farmer, and I think those consumers there's still a number to reach. But I also think that people are like, maybe I can't get to the market on Saturday. I wish the grocery store had it. Mm-hmm. So I really see we've got a ton of school districts in this state who are really excited about farm to school programs, mm-hmm. educational programs, but also actually using local farm produce in their school lunch program. Columbia, Missouri has done that and has done a great job with it. I mean, there's a lot of places across the state have done that, from little small schools to big schools. And that, you know, that's going to take us ramping up our supply too. So there's a lot of opportunities.
Not many years ago, you were one of the first voices out there that was writing and speaking about the local foods and how important it was. You have to feel pretty good about where we've come.
Yeah, I do. And it's so funny now. It's like I tell people that I used to know almost everything that was going on in Missouri in terms of local foods, and now I have no clue.
Hard to keep track of it
yeah,
by now.
It is.
It's really
just
going.
Amazing. Well, down in your neck of the woods, you know, you go down to southwest Missouri, and there's just everything's just coming up. You know, there's a food policy council now forming in the southwest Missouri counties around Springfield. There's, the farmers market of the Ozarks is open year round.
They're competing farmers markets now in Springfield, which is great.
It's just amazing, and it's really flowered in this state, and I think we're uniquely situated in Missouri. We have a lot of population, so You know, when I was in Gillette, Wyoming last weekend for a wedding, and they had a market. It's a small market, but you know, you got 30,000 people out in northeastern Wyoming there in Gillette, and not a lot of access to bigger markets. So we're really lucky here in Missouri. We've got a lot of people. We have access to markets, and I think there's
no farm in Missouri that's very far from a pretty good metropolitan area where there is a market.
That's right, and that they can get, you know, and now my interest is in how are those local food systems working for rural areas. And you know, we have hospitals in rural areas that are looking at some of the farm to school things and saying,
we could do that.
Yeah, and we'd like to do that. We think it's a good thing to do, and maybe we'll get some healthier food in, and that people will actually eat it because it's coming from some local farmers, and they might find that really exciting. So, you know, there's a lot of really interesting developments.
And it's interesting because Missouri is kind of ranked pretty low on availability of food. I think we're one of the lowest states because we do have a lot of people that are long ways from a good food supply. So
that's right.
Maybe we can bring this back to some local areas.
That's true. That's right.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for tonight. Watch for the documentary Changing Lands, Changing Hands to be shown here on KMOS. And I'd like to say thanks again to Dr. Mary Hendrickson for being with us tonight, and to Dan and Laura Pugh for allowing us to visit Honey Creek Farm. But before we go, we'd also like to thank you, our viewers, for tuning in to Show Me Ag. We hope you'll tune in next time for another look at a topic touching rural Missouri. For everyone here at KMOS and myself, good night.